Have you ever looked at a single set of government documents, just one single contract, and found two completely opposite stories? Well, that is exactly the fascinating paradox we're going to be diving into in today's explainer.
I mean, think about it. How does a contract renegotiation that allegedly saved the government hundreds of millions of rands also trigger accusations of a 7 million rand bribe? It sounds literally impossible, right? But that is the exact puzzle we're looking at today.
And just to be clear, all of this comes straight from the source. We're looking at the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, specifically the explosive testimonies surrounding the Lindela facility. We're going strictly by the findings in these pages to figure out how this incredible contradiction actually happened.
Okay, part 1. The setup. The Lindela Repatriation Facility contract. Let's get right into it. So, to really understand this paradox, we first need to know what was actually at stake here. The Lindela facility was operated by a Bosasa subsidiary for the Department of Home Affairs, and honestly, the stakes were incredibly high right from the start. We are talking about a massive detention and repatriation center for undocumented migrants. The initial contract to manage this whole shebang was locked in for a 10-year period, starting way back in October 2005.
Now, according to the official findings, the annual gross value of this contract to Bosasa was a staggering 93.6 million rand. That is a massive amount of money on the table. And because of that, Bosasa was highly motivated to maximize their revenue, especially since it was originally paid out per person detained at the facility. And this led to a bizarre, almost cinematic detail in the report. Bosasa actually disguised their own trucks to look exactly like South African police service vehicles. No joke. They bought buses, painted them up, and even used police reservists to drive them around to actively catch undocumented migrants. Why? Well, to artificially drive the facility's occupancy up to an incredible 7,000 people.
Which brings us to part 2, the catalyst, stopping the financial bleeding.
So, by 2006, the Department of Home Affairs had a huge problem. Their annual budget for Lindela was completely depleted in just 6 months. They literally needed a 120 million rand bailout. Here's why. The department was locked into paying a fixed fee based on a minimum threshold of 3,500 people. But in reality, actual occupancy sometimes dropped to just 1,000 people. So they were essentially paying for 2,500 empty beds every single day. This gross inefficiency triggered a massive turnaround strategy from the minister to review and renegotiate the contract just to stop the financial bleeding. Enter part 3. The accusation. Angelo Agrizzi's testimony. Now, here is where the story completely splits in two. Whistleblower Angelo Agrizzi was right in the middle of Bosasa's operations, and his testimony paints a very dark picture of this contract renegotiation. According to Agrizzi, the renegotiation and the price reduction, they were just a smokescreen, a cover-up to quietly secure an untendered 5-year extension for Bosasa. He claimed a consultant named Lindela Repatriation was brought in to make this happen. Agrizzi testified that by lowering the monthly price by about 860,000 rand, Bosasa was able to lock in that extension without triggering public scrutiny or needing Treasury approval. So, in his view, it wasn't about saving the government money out of the goodness of their hearts. It was a highly strategic move. By giving up a relatively small financial concession, Bosasa guaranteed their massive revenue stream for another 5 years. Why? Because, as Agrizzi famously put it in his own words, it kept everybody quiet. But it gets deeper. Agrizzi testified that a 7 million rand bribe was expected to be paid to that consultant, Lindela Repatriation, for facilitating this favorable extension. According to the testimony, this backroom deal was struck between Bosasa executives and the consultant to ensure the contract seamlessly rolled over. And in a moment of pure, dark irony, Agrizzi claims a portion of this bribe was paid monthly through a front company. Its name? The Wine Merchant Company. Seriously. Because paying a lump sum of 7 million rand was apparently a bit too conspicuous, Bosasa allegedly agreed to pay the consultant 75,000 rand a month through this front. And this actually continued until Bosasa faced bank scrutiny and cash flow issues, which forced them to stop the payments and help rebrand the consultant's firm instead.
But hold on, let's look at part 4, the defense, Kevin Wakeford's math.
This is where things get really wild, because turnaround advisor Kevin Wakeford stepped in with a completely contradictory defense. Wakeford was the ministerial turnaround advisor appointed to oversee the restructuring of the Department of Home Affairs, and his testimony provides a starkly different reading of the exact same events. He basically said, look, it defies plain logic for Bosasa to pay a massive bribe for a deal that ultimately lost them hundreds of millions in guaranteed revenue. He emphatically denied knowing about any bribe or being part of any corrupt meetings. For Wakeford, the math simply didn't add up to a corrupt scheme favoring Bosasa.
Let's actually break down Wakeford's math here. The renegotiation lowered the minimum headcount, which dropped the monthly invoice from nearly 7.9 million rand down to 7.5 million rand. Before this, Bosasa was billing based on 3,250 people. The new addendum dropped that liability to 2,500 people. This instantly, literally overnight, saved the Department of Home Affairs over 640,000 rand a month.
And it wasn't just that. Wakeford outlines how the addendum secured a lower minimum threshold, a consumer price index holiday for the state, and an option for the DHA to eventually purchase the facility. That holiday meant the state got a 5-year break on inflation increases. The price stayed completely flat for 62 months. On top of that, Bosasa had to spend 5 million rand upgrading facilities out of their own pocket. From Wakeford's perspective, this was a heavily one-sided negotiation that immensely benefited the taxpayer, definitely not Bosasa.
So here is the absolute crux of the issue. On one side, we have Agrizzi claiming a corrupt scheme for an illegal extension. On the other side, Wakeford demonstrating massive savings for the state. Agrizzi says it was a 7 million rand bribe to secure their future. Wakeford points to official DHA financial statements showing immediate direct savings of 7.7 million rand per year, with potential future savings of 112 million.
Which leads us into Part 5. Two conflicting truths, the complexity of state capture. Just when you think you've wrapped your head around the math, Agrizzi fired back. Because you're probably wondering, how do you reconcile sworn testimony of a front company paying monthly bribes with audited government financials showing massive state savings? Well, Agrizzi testified that Bosasa simply made their money back through massive increases in repatriation transport costs. That essentially wiped out the so-called savings. He stated that while the occupancy averages might have to look like savings on paper, the fixed fees per inmate stayed exactly the same, and Bosasa quietly ballooned the transport costs to keep their profits sky high.
So that leaves us with a nearly impossible puzzle to solve. How do investigators actually untangle the truth when the official math and the sworn testimony tell two entirely different stories? Did the state pull off a brilliant renegotiation, or was it a masterfully disguised piece of state capture? The Commission's report lays out these two truths side by side, leaving us to grapple with the incredibly murky reality of how these colossal government contracts actually operate behind closed doors. So what do you think? Let that sit with you for a while.